I was the one who built it. 6 months of planning, sleepless nights, and calls to every contact I had to raise $26,000 for the biggest tech conference of the year. My name was supposed to be on every banner. And yet, when the brochure dropped this morning, the keynote spot was listed under someone else's name, an intern who started 3 weeks ago. His last name, same as my boss's. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Was this a mistake? Or a message? What do you do when the system you believed in spits in your face? 6 months ago, I stood in front of a whiteboard, marker in hand, full of fire. I pitched the idea with everything I had, voice shaking with excitement, heart thudding in my chest. A $26,000 tech conference, hosted by our firm, with me as the architect. I mapped out the themes, the speakers, the strategy, even reached out to the first 3 sponsors myself. My boss nodded, impressed, said, "This could be your breakthrough." And I believed him. Every night after that, I stayed late. I'd leave when the office lights turned off one by one, silence settling like dust. Some nights I slept at my desk, woken only by the janitor switching off the hallway light. I wasn't just building a conference, I was building my legacy. But then came the first ripple. An email arrived at 6:48 a.m. on a rainy Thursday. The subject line was, "Urgent, finalize deck." It was from my boss, addressed to Sarah, his assistant. Use the attached outline and pass it to Tyler for revision. I blinked at the screen. There was no attachment from me, because I hadn't sent anything yet. More importantly, I wasn't CC'd. I scrolled down. The outline was mine, word for word, lifted from a draft I had shared privately a week ago. I sat back in my chair. Maybe it was a clerical mistake. Maybe he just forgot to include me. But something inside me whispered otherwise. That night, I came home at 11:07 p.m., shoes soaked, body sore. I crept past the living room and down the hall to my daughter's room. Her nightlight glowed soft yellow. I stood at the door, peering through the crack. She had fallen asleep clutching a drawing, 3 stick figures under a tree. One of them had a briefcase. My wife came up behind me, arms crossed. She waited. She asked for you 3 times. Her voice wasn't angry, just tired. I had to finalize the budget spreadsheet, I said, not even convincing myself. She sighed. "Jake, I know you're doing all this for us, but if you keep going like this, there might be no us left to enjoy it." I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. The next morning, I proposed a new idea to my boss, a secondary event with a local university partnership to boost post-conference engagement. He barely glanced at the mock-up before sliding it back to me. "Not the direction we're going," he said, "but it strengthens our community reach. Jake, drop it." It was the first time he shut me down without discussion. That had never happened before. I nodded slowly and left the room, but a part of me stayed behind. Confused, unsettled. Maybe he was stressed. Maybe something was shifting. 2 days later, a new intern joined the team. His name was Tyler Grant, fresh from NYU, smart, polite, eager, and, as it turned out, my boss's nephew. At first, he just shadowed me, sat in meetings, took notes, asked a few questions. But then I noticed he started leading updates on my behalf, running slide reviews, presenting ideas that sounded eerily like mine. One afternoon, a meeting was called to finalize the speaking schedule. I waited for the calendar invite. It never came. I walked past the glass meeting room. Inside, I saw Tyler presenting. My boss, Sarah, and two partners sat around the table, nodding. I texted my mother that night, told her I might be heading into a rough patch. She replied within seconds, "The world isn't always fair, Jake, but don't lose yourself just to survive it." 3 days later, the conference brochure was released. I downloaded the PDF, eyes scanning for my name. Keynote speaker, Tyler Grant. No mention of me, not even in the credits. I didn't blink, didn't move, just stared. That evening, a contract packet came to my inbox from our legal team. Documents for sponsor acknowledgement. The project representative must signature line had Tyler's name typed in. I sat in my chair, the hum of the computer fan the only sound in the room. This wasn't a mistake. It was intentional, systemic, and well planned. I was being erased, but I wasn't ready to disappear. It hit the headlines the next morning. Young innovator leads disruption at annual tech summit. The picture was of Tyler Grant, grinning beside a stage banner I had personally designed. The article called him the visionary behind the concept, praising his fresh perspective and leadership at such a young age. Not once was my name mentioned. I closed the tab and leaned back, fingers laced behind my head. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was waiting to be. That day, Ethan from IT passed me in the hallway. He didn't say anything, just tapped my shoulder and muttered, "Check your inbox, personal folder, now." Inside was a zip file, untitled, no message. I opened it cautiously. Email chains, PDFs, meeting memos, all internal. One thread caught my eye. A revision to the official project document. Subject: Update, Conference Concept Ownership. I opened it, hands suddenly cold. 2 weeks before the brochure release, HR had submitted a file to leadership. Under the Lead Strategist section, my name had been removed. Tyler's added. The footer timestamp proved it was edited after my original submission. I felt something crack inside me. It wasn't the betrayal. It was the silence that followed it. No explanation. No warning. Just a quiet overwrite. Another file. A scanned memo, this time on company letterhead. Per executive directive, consolidate public-facing materials under Grant. Executive directive. Someone at the top had decided I didn't deserve credit. I stared at the screen. That was it. No knife, no shouting match, no smoking gun. Just a line in a memo, neat and clinical, a surgical erasure. That night, I didn't go home right away. I walked. Blocks turned into neighborhoods. By the time I reached my street, it was almost midnight. I pushed open the front door and paused. My daughter's drawing was still taped to the fridge, but there was a new one, fresh crayon still bright. 3 stick figures. One of them had no face. Above it, in messy handwriting, "Where is Daddy?" I stood in the doorway to her room and watched her sleep. She clutched her blanket tight, breathing softly. Her tiny backpack leaned against the wall, still unzipped from school. My wife stepped up beside me. "She asked if you moved away," she whispered. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The next morning, I showed up to the office and said nothing. Tyler walked past, nodding casually. "Morning, Jake." He didn't look smug. He didn't even seem aware. That made it worse. I didn't ask questions. I didn't challenge anyone. I opened my laptop, clicked open a blank folder, and began to copy. Design files, budget plans, sponsorship emails, drafts, iterations, whiteboards, voice memos. Every thread that traced the conference back to me, I backed it up onto a secure drive. It was methodical. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. Later that day, I saw Natalie from HR in the break room. She smiled at me. She was the one who had mentored me during my first 6 months, the one who once wrote my performance review with the line, "Jake embodies everything we value." Now she had signed off the form that erased me. I didn't confront her, just like she hadn't warned me. Back at my desk, I checked my bank app. My mother's hospital bill had been processed. The company's health coverage didn't apply. I filed a request for emergency assistance. 2 hours later, I received a reply. Request denied. No sufficient grounds. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, then slowly lowered. I shut the screen and stared at the blank wall in front of me. At 7:12 p.m., a message appeared in my private inbox. Unknown sender. I saw what they did to you. I used to be you. I have proof. Reply if you want it. No name. No signature. I read it 5 times. Then I deleted it, but not before saving the text elsewhere. That night, as I lay in bed beside my sleeping wife, I stared at the ceiling and listened to the tick of the clock. I wasn't scared. I wasn't angry. I was awake. And I was done waiting for fairness to arrive. The calendar alert popped up on my screen at exactly 9 a.m. Subject, Internal Ethics Review, Mandatory Attendance Location, 18th Floor Conference Room. Attendees, Jake Anderson, Legal Counsel, HR, Executive Management. My hand hovered over the mouse. No explanation, no prep time. Just a summons. At 9:30 sharp, I walked into the room. The blinds were drawn. 4 people sat at the long table. My boss, the general counsel, Natalie from HR, and a man I didn't recognize, who introduced himself as outside consultant. They motioned for me to sit. No greetings. No small talk. My boss cleared his throat. Jake, we've received concerning information regarding your role in the recent sponsorship allocations and communications. My stomach didn't drop. My pulse didn't spike. I just waited. We've discovered multiple emails, including a transfer request from your account that appears to redirect sponsor funds in violation of company guidelines. He slid a folder toward me. Inside was a printout of an email with my name and company signature, addressing a sponsor and confirming fund reallocation. The email was fake. The language was off. The tone wasn't mine. I looked up. You know this isn't real. We have to treat it seriously, Natalie said, not meeting my eyes. I didn't argue. I reached into my briefcase, pulled out a sealed envelope, and handed it across the table. Inside were hard copies of the original proposals, budget spreadsheets, and versions of all approved drafts, each stamped with SHA-1 verification codes and digital timestamps that predated any so-called transfer document. I let the room go quiet. The consultant adjusted his glasses, studying the timestamps. My boss's jaw tightened. I didn't come here to defend myself, I said. I came to give you the truth. Do with it what you will. I stood. Natalie spoke up. Jake, please sit. We're not done. But I already was. By the time I got back to my desk, I had 4 missed calls. One was from a blocked number. I didn't answer any of them. That night, I picked up my daughter from school. She ran toward me, backpack bouncing. You're early, she said, surprised. I laughed. Yeah, I guess I am. In the car, she pulled a folded paper from her bag. It was a drawing. Me standing tall next to a stage with the words, "My Dad's Big Idea," written in glitter pen. She pointed. You're the one in the middle. I looked at her in the rearview mirror. Hey, I asked, do you think doing the right thing always means you win? She tilted her head. I think doing the right thing means you sleep better. I smiled. Good answer. The next morning, my phone buzzed at 6:13 a.m. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Jake Anderson? Yes. This is Peter Langston. I represent one of the conference's primary sponsors. I was in the audience when Tyler Grant presented. I stayed silent. I know that presentation wasn't his. I also know the data he showed was, how do I say this, unvetted. Still, I said nothing. Langston's tone sharpened. Jake, do you have the original version of that presentation? The one with valid data? There it was. I do. He paused. Did you always have it? Yes. Another pause, then a soft chuckle. That's what I thought. I appreciate your time. Click. I stared at the phone for a long time before setting it down. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt clear. That evening, after dinner, I tucked my daughter into bed. She hugged her stuffed fox and whispered, "Did your day go okay?" I kissed her forehead. I did the right thing. She smiled. Then it must have been a good day. I turned off the light, shut the door quietly behind me, and stood in the hallway for a moment. Sometimes the truth doesn't roar. It doesn't make headlines or crash through windows. Sometimes the truth just sits with you, quiet, still, and undeniable. And that's enough. It began with a press release. Tech leader faces internal audit following conference controversy. That was the headline. By noon, it had already been picked up by 6 news outlets. Terms like improper credit attribution, unauthorized data manipulation, and misuse of sponsorship funds danced across every article. The company froze all sponsorship initiatives within hours. Events were canceled. Meetings went dark. Executives stopped replying to internal threads. There was a hum of fear beneath every polite email, every cautious Slack message. Something was crumbling. I sat in my office, door closed, watching it all unfold in real time. Not one person came to check on me. Not one mentioned my name. That somehow was worse than being blamed. Late that evening, as I stepped outside into the driveway, a figure stood at the edge of my yard. A woman, trench coat pulled tight, hair damp from the drizzle. She approached slowly. "Jake Anderson?" she asked. I nodded. She flipped a badge. Local news affiliate. Investigative reporter. "Do you mind if I ask you something off record?" I didn't answer. She studied me. "Are you the one who leaked it?" I held her gaze. Let the silence hang. "I have sources inside who say it was you. The documents, the timelines, the SHA signatures, they trace back to your original decks." Still, I said nothing. "I'm not here to burn you," she added. "I think people need to know the truth. And I think you wanted the same." "People already know," I replied. "That's enough." She stared a moment longer, then gave a faint nod. "If you ever change your mind." She left a card on my mailbox. 2 days later, the headlines shifted again. Former state undersecretary implicated in corporate collusion probe. I nearly dropped my coffee when I saw the name. A man I'd seen once in a high-level meeting. He'd been introduced casually, just an investor. No one said he used to sit in Congress. Now, he was linked to a shell company that funneled support to multiple board members, some of whom had signed off on Tyler's elevation. The web was larger than I thought, much larger. That night, I stood in the kitchen with my wife, both of us watching our daughter build Lego castles on the rug. "They might start digging into you," she said quietly. "I know. They might come knocking. Lawyers, reporters, maybe worse. I know." She looked at me, her voice softer. "Jake, I love what you did. I love what it stands for. But I want you safe more than I want you right." I reached for her hand. Me too. The next morning, a secure email landed in my inbox. Anonymous server. Encrypted attachments. Inside were 3 new files, all tied to previously undisclosed internal memos, proof of campaign funds flowing through dummy event budgets. It was deeper than fraud. It was federal. I stared at the documents for a long time. Then I closed the laptop and walked away. That weekend, we took our daughter to the park. We laughed. I didn't check my phone. For the first time in months, I let myself be nowhere else. I wasn't done. But I wasn't going to burn everything in one fire. Later that evening, I walked into my office, sat down, and wrote a single sentence in my notebook. How far do you go to do what's right before it becomes wrong? It was nearly 10 p.m. when the doorbell rang. I was in the kitchen, rinsing the last of the dinner dishes, when my wife peeked down the hallway and froze. She turned to me, her face pale. It's him. I wiped my hands and stepped into the entryway. Standing on my porch, drenched from the light rain, was my former boss. His shoulders were hunched, hands at his sides like a schoolboy caught cheating. He looked smaller than I remembered. We didn't speak for a few seconds. Then he did something I never expected. He knelt, right there, on my front step, in the dark. I'm sorry, he said. His voice cracked. I don't know where else to go. I didn't answer. He looked up at me, eyes red. I should have fought for you. I knew what they were doing, Jake. I knew, but I was afraid. I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, and let him speak. They threatened my contract, my pension, said if I didn't fall in line, they'd replace me too. And I believed them. I told myself you were strong enough to take it, that maybe you'd land on your feet. I crossed my arms. You didn't just let them erase me, I said quietly. You watched. I know, he whispered, and it kills me. We stood in silence. Then I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. I held it out to him. What's this? He asked. 6 years of back-end financial records, I said. Meetings, board notes, correspondence between shell entities and top-level execs. His eyes widened. You had all this? I've had it for a while. He didn't take it. I stepped closer. You want to do the right thing? Then use it. Expose them. But this time, don't flinch. He took the drive, fingers trembling. You could have buried me, he said. I almost did. He looked down at his hands. What changed? My daughter, I said. She asked me if doing the right thing makes you sleep better. I realized it does. He smiled, bitter and tired. I don't sleep much anymore. You will. Eventually. He nodded. What happens now? That depends on what you do next. He left without another word. I stood outside for a long time, letting the rain settle around me. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like release. That night, after tucking my daughter in, I sat by her bedside and watched her sleep. The weight in my chest loosened slowly. I didn't need revenge. I needed change. The next morning, I reopened a folder I had buried months ago, something I'd called the Network Initiative. It was just a sketch then, a plan, a dream. Now it felt urgent. I reached out to 3 people I trusted, 2 former colleagues who had also been burned, and 1 journalist who never published anything without proof. I told them I wanted to create a space for whistleblowers, reformers, and people ready to clean up corporate culture from the inside out. They all said yes. By the end of the week, we had our first virtual roundtable. 10 people, different industries, different scars, same story, We didn't share names publicly. We didn't make noise. We just started building. The new office was small, tucked between a used bookstore and a dentist's clinic. No glass walls, no valet parking, no fancy espresso machines. Just a long table, 4 chairs, and a whiteboard covered in markers that barely worked. But to me, it felt like fresh oxygen. I called it Second Foundation. The first employee was a former QA manager who'd been laid off after testifying anonymously in a compliance investigation. The second was a marketing director who left after refusing to falsify metrics. By the end of the month, we were 10 people deep, all scarred, all steady, all determined to build something better. We didn't make promises we couldn't keep. We didn't chase numbers at the cost of people. We didn't reward manipulation. Instead, we built slowly, deliberately. Word spread faster than I expected. Clients began reaching out, not because of what we were selling, but because of how we operated. We heard you're the guy who didn't bend. We want to work with someone who still believes in right and wrong. It wasn't about legacy anymore. It was about example. On launch day, I brought my daughter to the office. She wore a too big Team Second Foundation shirt and clutched a balloon. As I showed her around, she tugged my hand. You started this, right? She asked. I did. She smiled. Then you're the founder. I guess so. She looked up at me. But I think you're really the promise keeper. I didn't respond. I just bent down and hugged her. Later that week, I received a sealed envelope. No logo. No return address. Inside, a single letter from a private equity firm offering to acquire Second Foundation for an 8-figure sum. Complete buyout. Full autonomy on paper. I folded the letter once, twice, and slid it into the back of a drawer. No reply. A few months passed. We hired more. Expanded. Built partnerships with ethics-focused startups. Got invited to speak at business schools. Not about scaling, but about surviving with integrity. And then came the second envelope. This time, it wasn't an offer. It was a thank you. Typed. Neatly signed. From Tyler Grant, the intern. I'm now working for a nonprofit that defends whistleblowers and fair labor policies, he wrote. I know I played a part in something ugly, and I've been trying to make something good from it ever since. You probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed you to know. I see it now, and I'm sorry. I stared at the letter for a long time. Then I placed it beside my daughter's drawing on my office shelf. The one with the stick figure labeled My Dad's Big Idea. Sometimes redemption doesn't arrive with trumpets. Sometimes it comes in ink and silence. On a crisp Friday morning, a young man knocked on our office door. I didn't recognize him. Early 30s, nervous smile, briefcase too large for his frame. He introduced himself as the new CEO of a rising startup. We're trying to avoid the mistakes others made. Culture, process, values, all of it. I offered him coffee. Before leaving, he paused by the door. I know this might sound odd, he said, but I was an intern once. I watched everything happen at your old company from the sidelines. I blinked. I almost quit the industry, he continued. But then I read about you, quietly doing what no one else dared. It reminded me there's still room for people who care. He handed me a small token, a pin etched with the words, Lead with Integrity. Thanks for staying in, he said. After he left, I stood by the window, watching the street below. Back at home that evening, I checked on my daughter as she slept. Her breath was steady, her face peaceful. I sat beside her bed, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. We did it, sweetheart, I whispered. Quietly, but we did it.